to record this session. And so now we're recording. Again, I'm Shannon Lee, Executive Director of Relay, and I'm really excited to introduce to you and or to refresh your memory on, because some of you might be familiar with this, the world's most widely used management model called SL2. In my role here at Relay, I have three primary duties. Number one, I drive the strategic direction of the organization. Two, I create and curate the organization's programs, such as this one. And I hire, develop, and retain a high-performing staff. That's it. And the way I do that last part has a lot to do with what we're going to talk about today with SL2. And don't mind me as I pause, I'm just admitting people into the Zoom. So Relay is all about professional development, but not in the typical way that many people are used to. We're most interested in helping people awaken to their best selves. And the way we do this is through professional development. We really believe that great professional development brings about change in the whole person. And so, yes, there are times where we need to learn management models, such as the one that we're going to talk about today. But I think as you learn a little bit about SL2, you'll find that the application of what you're going to learn today has whole life implications. And we might talk about that today. I might ask you for some input around that. And so how do we do this? We do this through transformational programs that focus on a mindset-first approach to change. Great development experiences, however, should include not just mindset, but strategy, tactics, and build accountability in people. So SL2, where if you think of this as a continuum with mindset, strategy, tactics, and accountability, if that would be a holistic approach to leadership development, which we take, I would put SL2 in the category of strategy and tactics. And there's a little bit of mindset in there, and I'll call those pieces out as we move forward. So for today, what I'd like to do is start with a little bit of the research that has been done related to SL2, and then we'll go into specifics about what SL2 is. Real quickly, though, what I want to do is remind you that there are a few interactive icons you might see, or actually might hear me mention something. So chat, for those of you, I think by now everybody knows what these things are, but because I recognize a lot of names on this Zoom, but not all of them. And so I don't know how many of you are actively using Zoom, but when I say chat, that's just an opportunity for you to type in a chat box. If I ask you to use a check mark, then you can go up into the top where it says you're viewing Shannon Lee's screen. There's a menu up there for annotate, and you'll see a little pencil. You can click on that and check mark, or you can use a heart or a star. So there's going to be times I'm going to ask you to respond by using annotate and putting some marks on the screen. If you are joining us from a company that limits the functionality of Zoom, so there's some folks at certain companies, depending on your firewall, that you can view and use chat with Zoom, but you can't use the annotate function, then you can just hop into chat instead of using the annotate function when I mention that. And then we won't be using raise of hands today. All right, so we've all had good bosses and bad bosses. And bad bosses, we know, have a huge impact on attitudes, behaviors, and the performance of their team members. Research confirms that there's a real cost to organizations that have ineffective leadership in terms of high turnover, and you see these four categories here: high turnover, low engagement, lower productivity, and ultimately poor bottom line results. So let's take a look at a few of these. So a high turnover, 9 to 32% of an organization's turnover can be avoided through better leadership skills. Now you might say, oh, 9% is not bad, but just think about it. Most organizations actually fall somewhere in between there. So let's say your organization has a 15% turnover rate. What if you could reduce your turnover rate to lower than that, to 9% or lower, just by helping your leaders and helping all professionals at your organization develop better leadership skills? This is what we call in sales low-hanging fruit. This is preventable, in other words. Engagement. Only 30% of employees are engaged at work, and managers account for at least 70% of the variance in employee engagement, 70%. Again, this is avoidable. And then lower productivity. 58% of employees say poor management is the biggest thing getting in the way of productivity. And whenever we work with teams or even entire organizations, the number one problem we run into is not skills, it's the productivity being lost because, why? Their managers, their leadership are not leading well. And then, of course, we look at the costs of this. Poor leadership costs the typical organization as much as 7% of their annual sales. And this includes nonprofits. Even though we don't think of nonprofits as having sales, think of revenue. Think of fundraising. Low or poor leadership is affecting your fundraising by up to 77%. That's a lot of money in the nonprofit world where every single penny counts everywhere. But that 7% can really add up. And so if we can prove these things through better leadership, wouldn't we want to do that? So I'm curious, and you can, if you have annotate available to you, I'd love for you to put a check mark or a star or a heart or something, or just draw on the screen of which of these resonate the most with you. I'm sure all of them resonate with you, but which of them resonates the most with you? You don't have to give a reason why. And if it's easier for you or annotate's not available, go ahead and place that in chat. And just in chat, you're going to put turnover, engagement, productivity, or profits is what you'll put in chat if you are not able to use annotate. And I'm just going to wait a second. Yeah, Katie, thank you. Lower engagement. Productivity, that's a big one. Thanks, Melissa. Lower engagement. Yeah, sometimes when we have poor leadership, we think of a lot of the interpersonal issues, right? There's more drama. It's just that's interpersonal issues is just a really fancy way of saying there's more drama on the job, but there are hard, cold numbers associated with poor leadership. Thanks, Nick. I got your chat. Productivity. Absolutely. Yeah, so it looks like we're kind of camping out in engagement and productivity. And we all know that there's a link between productivity and profits, right? In the nonprofit world, there's definitely a link between productivity and revenue, donor development, etc. Let me go ahead and clear all of these drawings before we move to the next slide. Thank you all for your responses. So how do we address then these issues caused by poor leadership? So there's a couple of things going on in the workforce. You have inexperienced leaders who have yet to develop these quote unquote bad leader habits. And then you have more experienced leaders who have already developed these bad leader habits. So what do we do about this? How are we going to address this? So the research of others and the research that we have looked into shows that employees need different levels of direction and support depending on their level of competence and commitment on any given task. And so what we're saying here, the connection that's being made in the research is that when we have problematic management, we have problematic leadership, giving us those 4 issues that we just described. The issue is typically a mismatch between what employee needs and what they're getting from their leader. And there's a reason for that mismatch, okay? There's a reason for it. And so, unfortunately, here's what typically happens. I'm a manager, I'm a leader, I'm a supervisor, whatever your title is. I have someone who's not performing. I've told them what I want them to do, they're not doing it, or they're not doing it to my expectation. Of course, I'm overgeneralizing here. What's the first thing I do as a leader? Generally speaking, I blame the other person. I shift my thinking into blame. When we shift into blame, it is really hard for our brain to go into solution finding because blame comes from a sense of fear. So this is a little mindset piece here. Instead, what we want to do is we want to shift our brain into thinking, I wonder what development need is not being met. So this helps the leader grow because now they have to stretch to what that person needs to develop and grow to actually perform better. And it helps the employee because they are going to now more readily, getting what they need from their leader, thus reducing those issues that we discussed previously. But how do we do that? How do we actually do that? And so this is the idea of kind of leveling up and down those two pedals or levers of direction and support. Direction and support. So that's going to be key in our discussion. A few more stats here. Okay, so we all know from personal experience that one-size leadership doesn't fit all. I'm sure many of you have had leaders where, let's say you are extremely, let's say you learn quickly. I'll describe myself. I learn very quickly. You give me a new task, I'm going to have a lot of questions at first, but once I get it, I get it. And I don't need you to keep instructing me. I need you to leave me alone and let me be autonomous, and I will perform. I will exceed expectations, etc. And I'm guessing that most, if not all of you on this call are like that, because why else would you sign up for a workshop at 9 o'clock in the morning in the middle of the week, right? When you're probably zoomed out as it is, okay? So what happens though, when the leader tends to be the leader that likes to give a lot of supervision, okay? What do we call that? Can anyone guess what we call that in chat? When I don't need that much supervision, but I keep getting it from my leader. It's a negative connotative word. What do we call that leader when they're giving us too much supervision beyond the time that we actually need it? A micromanager. Thank you, Katie, Nick, Dale, you got it. Ding, ding, ding. If I had a prize, I'd send it to you. Well, what we call it is over supervision. Over supervision, okay? And the reason why it's over supervision is because it's more supervision than the person needs, okay? So that's when you have a leader that has a certain default style, which, by the way, we all have one, showing up to the learner. We're just going to call this the direct report in this situation, the learner, giving them what they don't need. Sometimes the learner needs a lot of supervision. Some people learn at different paces. So it's not that over supervision in and of itself is wrong. It's when we apply it. So we want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want to say that micromanagers are bad. But here's the thing. There's a time in my development that I need a micromanager because I don't know how to do stuff. So I need a list. I need a template. I need how-tos. I need to know exactly what and when and who to talk to. But eventually I don't need that anymore. So timing is important. A McKinsey report released in August of 2017, it's sourced there at the bottom of the slide. It's called What's Missing in Leadership Development. It highlights this issue and the need for a more flexible or situational approach to leadership. The research shows that 54% of leaders only use one leadership style regardless of the situation, which means that they are often using the wrong leadership style for meeting the needs of their people. So I'm going to tell you about a gentleman named Bob. That's not his real name, but it's a real situation. So Bob was my first ever boss. This was when I was 15 and in high school. It was like kind of a gift shop where I worked. And I was learning all kinds of office skills like filing. I don't know how many of you are old enough to know what a tickler file is. People don't use those anymore, but I learned how to use a tickler file. I learned how to use some of the earliest accounting software from Peachtree, if that's throwing back, kind of aging me a little bit here. I was learning how to make copies on all different sizes, make books out of those copies, because we also did some light copying for customers besides doing like engraving gifts. And there are all these little tasks that I did every day that I came in after school. And Bob, in the beginning, would watch me work and say, hey, show me, I taught you how to do this last week. Let me see you do this. Let me make sure you're doing it correctly. That is an appropriate leadership style for Bob. The problem is after I'd been working there for a couple of years, Bob continued to, quote unquote, look over my shoulder to make sure I was doing it right. And then Bob started correcting things that I was doing. They weren't wrong. They were just different. They were still getting things done. And sometimes I was getting them done more efficiently than the way Bob had taught me. And so at this point, Bob transitioned into over supervision, whereas before he was providing appropriate supervision. Why did Bob do that? It wasn't because Bob was a terrible person. It wasn't because Bob was a terrible manager, which is what I would have labeled him back then. It was because Bob was showing up in his default leadership style. And we're going to give you a label for that here in a few minutes. So Bob began to show up in ways that were comfortable to Bob, but were not useful to me anymore. And so that means that 50% of the time or more, he was using the wrong leadership style, and I wasn't getting what I needed to grow and develop. When we do this as leaders, we kind of hit the ceiling of helping other people develop, and that's what we want to avoid. Okay, so SL2, we believe, is the solution to this. We believe that people deserve a great manager and a great place to work. Team members at every level of the organization should get the right amount of direction and support when they need it so that they can develop mastery and self-reliance more quickly. I think we would all agree that all of us would love that when we hire someone, we would like to quickly move them to what we would describe as an autonomous performer. Yes? We all want the people working for us we want to be able to truly delegate, right? We want to be able to say, hey, Melissa, I need you to get this done by Friday next week. Let me know if you need anything, right? We all would love that. But there's an actual learning process that takes place that gets people there. It's not automatic, and everybody goes at a different pace. I'm going to show you how to know where your folks are. So this helps them to develop, understanding this process will help them develop. And leaders want to be their best. I truly believe this. There's always an exception, but for the most part, leaders want to know that they're giving people what they need. They intend to show up well, but don't always know how, and don't always have the skills to manage people effectively. They too deserve to be invested in and equipped with the right framework for their people. They shouldn't have to fail or misstep before they receive training. A situational leader, when we show up this way, managers, then this gives them the framework and skills to have more frequent, high quality conversations about performance and development with their team members, okay? And so the SL2 framework says we recognize that people develop in a certain pattern. Every adult develops this way based on academic research. That's number one. Number two, every manager, leader, anyone supervising another person has a default style. And unless they're taught how to show up in the other three of the four styles, that's not their default, they're not going to give people what they need. Now, here's what typically happens for folks when they get promoted to leadership. And I'm sure you can identify with this. Maybe this is you. Maybe you've experienced this in a manager yourself. And that's this. You have someone who's really good at their job as an independent or an individual contributor. When I say individual contributor, I just mean they themselves do not have any direct reports, okay? So they're really good at their job. So their boss looks at them and says, you're really good. We're going to give you a promotion and make you the boss of other people who do your job. And now you're going to be the boss of people who do that job, and you're going to lead them. Yay, congratulations. And we might give them some training. At the most, what they get training on is maybe our performance management system, like an electronic system. We might give them training on how we do performance reviews, right? But what almost no one gets training on is how to develop people in a way that ensures that they become autonomous performers. We're not taught what's called pedagogy, or how adults learn. We forget that adults are going through a learning process, just like children. And so what we're due is when we think about leading people with an SL2 process, we look at three things, okay? But first I want to back up because I want to talk to you about Dr. Tor Dahl, D-A-H-L. He's the former president of the World Confederation of Productivity Science and a member of the board of directors for the American Productivity and Quality Center. And he says this, although most people are working very hard these days, we have found that each individual in an organization can still increase productivity, I'm not even joking you, by 30%. The answer lies in the fact that most workers, often of no fault of their own, are not working on the right things in the right way. The culprits are a variety of organizational ills, including a lack of clear directions and goals. Directions and goals. So SL2 teaches these 3 essential skills of the effective leader. Number 1 is goal setting. This is the starting point of a situational leader, creating alignment on what needs to be done and by when. For many of us, this is where we stop. We say, well, I told them what I needed done. I even told them what a good job looks like and when I needed it done by, and they didn't get it done. They dropped the ball, right? Blaming. We move into blame. The second skill, diagnosing. This is when we are assessing the team member's development level based on their competence and commitment on a specific goal or task, not on their entire job. So if we've set a goal for someone, then we're going to diagnose where are they developmentally on this goal. If they've never done this goal for us before at our organization, no matter how long they've worked for us, they are at a certain development level versus someone who has done this goal for us 3rd year in a row or 3rd quarter in a row. They're going to be at a different development level. So we diagnose where they are. And then what do? We match. We provide the leadership style that delivers the appropriate amount of direction and support based on what we diagnosed, based on their development level. So SL2 is about managers working in partnership with their team. And it's something you do with people, not to people. Okay? So I want to stop right there because that nuance is super important. Here's what typical managers do without management/leadership training. They, at most, hopefully, they're setting a goal saying, here's your job description. This is what I need you to do. Now go do it. That's at one end. And then at the other end, we're holding them accountable. And many of us have a varying, different relationships with holding people accountable. We think of it, some of us think of holding people accountable as something that's very conflict ridden, right? So we put off holding people accountable till something's really blown up. Or we just have a negative experience with holding people accountable because our mindset, whether we realize it or not, is that holding people accountable is something we do to them and that we're doing to them against their will, okay? So SL2 asks us to drop that mindset and to exchange it for the mindset that we're coming alongside and we're doing something with you that creates accountability in you. I would much rather help someone create accountability in themselves than to have to hold them accountable. Those are 2 different things, and they create 2 different emotional environments in the workplace. Now that employee sees this relationship with me as a partnership rather than me lording over them and doing something to them and making them get something done. All right, so let's look at goal setting. SL2 is a program of the Ken Blanchard companies. Relay is a Blanchard partner. And so whenever I mention Blanchard, that's what I'm referring to. So SL2 is a Blanchard program. So Blanchard encourages SMART goals, but I want you to notice something in this SMART goal. And that's, I believe, on the next slide. Yes, okay. So a lot of you have heard M as measurable, but Blanchard has switched this up. M is for motivating, but let's start at the beginning. Actually, I want to go back a slide. I want to call this out. Specific is what is the goal or task and what does a good job look like? And trackable is there a way to gauge progress? What would that be and what are those measures? That's things like when is it due, that kind of stuff. The reason why we start with the S and the T is because when you write a SMART goal, this is the only part that gets written down. It gets written down, okay? In our full SL2 program, we actually give you practice writing goals and making them, we create goals that are they're not as smart and you make them smarter. But suffice it to say that when you make a goal SMART, what we're talking about in writing a SMART goal is the specific and trackable portion, okay? That's the part that gets written down for the employee. Then we discuss with them the MAR. Are they excited and interested in the goal? Is it attainable? Is it realistic? Is it achievable? How is this goal relevant to the organizational goals? How is it aligned? So let's break some of these down. So if I give you a goal and I ask you if it's motivating, and the person says, and you tell me not really, then the discussion will be, what would make this more motivating to you? Okay? You may find that the S and the T need to be rewritten because maybe what you wrote wasn't motivating enough. Maybe it was demotivating because the trackable piece was impossible, because it wasn't attainable, for example. And so we want to have that discussion. We don't just blanket hand these out over email and then, forget about it. Attainable is super important. I was once talking to a CEO, and he was so proud of himself because he said, I cannot wait to give my 2020 goals. This is all before the shutdown hit, when we all had, rose-colored glasses back in January. But he's like, I can't wait to give this goal to my team. They're going to be so excited about it. I was like, why is that? And he goes, man, because it's our moonshot goal. He goes, we're never going to attain it this year, but I think it's going to really encourage them because it's so big. Now, I understand where he's coming from. And, that moonshot goal, maybe that should be in your 10-year picture, not your 1-year goal. Here's why. You, as the leader, and I don't care what level of leadership you might be sitting at, or if you're on this Zoom and maybe you're aspiring to leadership, you will always have a bigger vision and be more excited about the impossible goal, and other people will not. That will scare certain people. Not everybody is built for vision. That's not a good, bad thing. It's just different. I have really big ideas for Relay, and they excite me. But when I share them with my program manager, the first thing she starts thinking about is all of the things that need to happen to make that possible. And all of a sudden, it feels very unattainable for her. Does that make sense? And so we have to make sure that the goal we're giving people feels attainable to them. Is this something that can actually happen within the time frame that we've given in that trackable piece? And have we explained to them how it is relevant to the organization's goals? So we have a discussion around those things. And by the way, this discussion does not take a long time. My average SMART goal discussion takes 5 minutes. Okay? 5 minutes. Now, we as an organization use the SMART framework for our 10-year targets. We use them for our 3-year goals and our 1-year plan. And then from there, we break them down into quarterly goals and tasks. So we use this same framework no matter how big the goal is. It's just we define the timing. So if I have a goal that is to do something really big, the trackable piece might be by 2030, right? So does it feel attainable to achieve that, whatever it is, within 10 years? Yes. But if I have that same big goal and the trackable piece says that I'm going to attain it by the end of 2021, then it may not feel attainable. It might even then be demotivating, etc. So it's still the same framework. You just adjust the S and the T based on how much time you're giving this goal. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. The other thing, and I haven't updated the slide yet because we're still defining all of this as an organization, but we've been working very hard at the board level and at the policy level on making, for like the last 18 months or so, on our DEI initiatives and anti-racism initiatives. And one of the things that this is going to be changed for Relay that I want to mention very quickly is we're going to change this to a SMART-T goal or a SMART-T framework. I-E will be added to the end, I for inclusive and E for equitable. And so more to come on that. In fact, I'll probably be doing just one free workshop on SMART-T goal setting in 2021. I can't wait to share that with all of you. So keep your eyes peeled for that so that you can join us for that. Okay, so setting SMARCLES is the first skill of a situational leader. Cool? Everybody get that? I want to pause and see if there's any questions. So I'm going to open up the chat and just see if anyone has any questions. And I'll just wait about 30 seconds. Okay, I don't see any questions in there. If you do have a question, you don't have to wait for me to ask. You can pop one in there and I'll be checking them periodically. All right, so the second skill is called diagnosing. Diagnosing uses the learning development cycle, which is based on decades of research that shows that people go through four stages of development when learning a new task. It's important to note that development levels are goal or task specific. It's not person specific, okay? So a person is not, as you see here, D1. They are a D1 on a specific task, okay? So there's something different. Oh, thank you for that, Katie. You like the motivating piece. I've always seen it measurable. Yep, me too. When I first learned this, this way of looking at it, it made so much more sense to me. By the way, Relay, everything we do is based on servant leadership. And people have asked me before, well, isn't servant leadership different from situational leadership? And I want to make that connection for you really quick. To us, situational leadership is how you serve. It's the boots on the ground. It's the strategy of how you serve those that work for you. And I can think of no better way of serving people than having a conversation around, is this goal motivating to you? Is it motivating to you? Is it attainable? And then explaining its relevance. Like, what a way to serve others and to make sure that they're engaged in the process. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. All right, so just the last thing I said about this piece, a person is not D1, they are D1 on a specific task, okay? Every time I hit that mouse, it goes backwards. I apologize. Here we go. All right, so there are four development levels characterized by varying combinations of competence and commitment. Competence is composed of skill and knowledge. And here's what I want you to understand. Someone might have knowledge, but the skill has to be demonstrated. In other words, not just on their resume. So if you're someone, let's say you just hired someone and you've just hired a new controller in your accounting department, right? And they have 15 years experience as a controller. They have knowledge. They have skill as a controller, but do they have demonstrated competence that you have observed? That's key, because if they are new to your organization, there is no way you could have observed that competence. Now, they may move out of that into low and moderate and high competence quickly because they've been doing it for a while, but they've never done this for you. So we want to keep that in mind. Okay. So a person at D1 on a task displays low competence. Oh, wait, I forgot to define one other thing. My apologies. So we defined competence, which is a combination of skill and knowledge. How much skill and knowledge does an individual have for the specific task? Okay. Commitment is comprised of confidence, that's with an F, confidence and motivation. Okay. Confidence and motivation. Now, I'm going to describe these from a technical perspective, and I'm going to use a real life example that's overly simplified to help maybe drive home these development levels, okay? Just keeping an eye on the time. Cool. All right. So a person at D1 on a task we call the enthusiastic beginner. They display low competence and high commitment. Why? He or she is excited to complete the task, but doesn't know how to do so without supervision. Okay, this person doesn't know what they don't know. So often when someone doesn't know what they don't know, they put off that they are very competent, but really what your experience is, they're confident. Okay, that being said, they're typically eager to learn and willing to take direction. Keep that in the back of your mind. They're willing to take direction. As they move to D2, a person at D2 on a task is called the disillusioned learner. They're going to display a little bit more competence. That's why it says here, low to some competence. But they still don't know how to do the task without supervision. Because the task is harder than he or she anticipated, or possibly not as exciting as they originally anticipated, there's a significant drop in commitment. Okay? This person is likely feeling frustrated, discouraged, and overwhelmed, and they need reassurance that the mistakes are part of the learning process. Okay? Let me tell you, someone at D2 is where you have the highest risk of them quitting after they've just started. So you've hired someone, all of a sudden they're frustrated. You're like, where did that excited person go that I just hired that had all this confidence? Now they're like down in the mouth and they're frustrated and they're overwhelmed. Oh, they are at D2, my dear. And someone at D2 actually needs something different from you than they did it when they were at D1. It's not that they are the problem, it's that you need to meet their needs differently. That's all. Remember, we're shifting our thought process to they're not getting the work done, they're not this, that we're not going to move to blame, we're going to move to curiosity. I wonder what development need is not being met. That's where we're moving as a leader, okay? Then we move into development level 3. A person at D3 is what we call the capable but cautious performer. They display a moderate to high competence and can do the task without supervision. That being said, he or she may not be confident in his or her skills to get the task done, and sometimes they're hesitant, unsure, tentative. Another reason commitment could be less than positive is that the person may be bored with the task. They need to be re-energized around the task. So this is that person that might come to you where they're performing well, but they come to you with lots of questions as if they still don't know what they're doing, but you've seen demonstrated proof of their competence. They need something different from you now. They need more reassurance, more encouragement. Or they come to you and maybe they're just not energized anymore, but they're able to do the job really well. There's some things that they need from you. And then we move to development level D4. This is where we all want to be. This is where we want all of our direct reports to be. This is like the promised land. We call them the self-reliant achiever. They display both high competence and high commitment. This person is often recognized by others as an expert. They could teach someone else to do what they're doing. While they're self-reliant, this person does need recognition and to be challenged to maintain their level of performance, okay? In our training, we talk about the behaviors that show up at each of these levels that leaders can observe, or questions that they can ask to help them understand and diagnose the person's development in that full program. So you notice this continuum is from developing to develop. Now, I told you I was going to give you an analogy. And I want you to think of a baby learning to walk. So whether you've had a child or not, I think all of us have either watched a video or watched a cousin or nephew or niece or someone else's kid learn to walk, okay? So D1. What's this baby doing at D1? This is when they first realize, if we were in person, I would do it. Well, you wouldn't be able to see me, but normally what I do is I stand up. But they stand up and all of a sudden they realize, oh my gosh, my body can go vertical, right? They are excited. They're like, I got this. They're smiling, they're cooing. They don't yet know what they don't know. Put in chat what they don't know yet. What does the baby not know yet? What do they not know is going to happen? It is bound to happen. They're going to fall. Yep. They're going to fall. What might happen when they fall? What has the potential to happen when they fall, depending on where they're taking these risks? They're going to get hurt. Yeah. So the baby's learning and walking, and you as the parent or the adult in the room are like, yeah, that's awesome. But let me show you a couple things, right? You're coming alongside them. You're, if I can, we're moving this week, so there's just a lot of stuff everywhere here. So but you're doing this. Sorry. Anyone wants to screenshot this and share this? This is me being goofy on camera. You're walking along with them really slow, aren't you? You're taking steps with them. You're not standing outside of the process and going, just walk, just move your legs. Just move. No, you're doing it with them. You're showing them exactly how, step by step, right? D2, that baby's taken a few steps, but they have fallen down. Now they know what they don't know. So that commitment went from high to low because now they're discouraged. They're crying. They might have a little bruise on their head, a little scrape on their knee, right? But here's what's interesting. That D2 place, which is nobody likes being there, it is considered progression. We have to get people, and we, as we develop, have to get to a place of a little frustration and discouragement because it's what actually spurs us to learn the thing. Unless I recognize that I don't know something, I'm not going to seek out an answer, right? Without that void, I'm going to continue to go on my merry way, doing something the wrong way. And if I'm doing something the wrong way and my leader's not giving me what I need, I'm going to learn a goal or a task in the wrong, I'm going to learn it wrong, which is why that leader needs to be close by. It's why that parent needs to be close by so I can learn how to walk without falling. Okay, D3. All right, I'm going to do something goofy again. So here's the D3 walker. They're walking, now that they're letting go and they're realizing they can let go and they're taking a few steps. But remember, they have variable commitment. So here's what they do. They take a few steps and they're not sure if they're going to fall or not. So anybody know what they're going to do? Put it in chat. And as soon as I see it in chat, the right answer, I'm going to do it. Yeah. They sit. They sit. That's exactly. Grab the table or sit. They're going to go for safety. They're going to go for safety. Yep. And so, your son right now, Melissa, you're right in the middle of this, right? You get it. Okay, and then D4, Melissa, I've got bad news for you and good news. The good news is the bruises will start to be eliminated because he's going to be walking, but the bad news is he's going to be walking. He's going to be everywhere. So that's that. Now they're happy and then this process is going to repeat when Melissa's son learns to ride a bike someday or whatever, okay? We all go through this process. The problem is leaders judge it. Sorry, we've got stuff going on here today, if you can hear that. We judge it. Let's not judge these. Let's look at these as development needs, okay? So the third skill is that we match. We show up as leaders and give people what they need. So we've got our development levels down here at the bottom, okay? Got them here at the bottom. So let's start talking about this. So matching is where leaders learn about the different leadership styles and how to be more flexible. I told you, and we don't have time on this in our hour today to help you figure out which one you are, but if each of these S1, 2, 3, 4, you notice they coincide both in name and color with each of the development levels. Each of you has a default style. We actually have an assessment called the LBA that helps you know what your style is. And my style is style 4. So do you think, just by logic, is it easier or harder for me to interact with someone who is at a D1? In chat, easier or harder for me it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder because I want to be like, hey, good job. Get this done by next week. I still give the SMART goal. SMART goal never changes. I always write it in a SMART goal and I always discuss it with them. But then how I treat the person and what I do with them after that is probably going to be more in line with my default. So I have to stretch. So for me, being highly directive and giving someone instructions and exactly what they need when they're a beginner, when they're this low competence, high commitment, is going to feel like micromanaging to me. It's going to feel like over supervision where I'm really giving them what they need. So let's talk about these leadership levels really quickly here. So just as there's 4 development levels for the learner, there's 4 leadership styles. And just like the learner down here has varying levels of competence and commitment. The leader gives varying combinations of directive and supportive behavior, okay? Directive and supportive behavior. So directive behavior refers to telling and showing people what to do and when to do it, how to do it, providing frequent feedback about results. Directive behavior, remember this, the intention is to build competence. Build competence, okay? It's not to micromanage, it's to build competence. Supportive behavior refers to skills such as listening, facilitating problem solving of others, encouraging, praising, involving others in decision making. Supportive behavior is used to build commitment. So directed behavior addresses competence. Supportive behavior addresses the commitment. So if a learner is low competence, the leader is going to be high direction. Does that make sense? And those kind of, they shift, and that's what you're going to hear. Okay, so style 1 is high directive, low supportive. Now, whenever I say low, I don't want you to hear no. It's not no support, it's just low. The goal with S1 is to help the others build competence on a given goal or task. Back to the baby. The S1 parent is saying, come on, Tim, come on, Sally, you can do it. And that's about it when it comes to supportive behavior. They're encouraging them to stand up. But for the most part, we're telling them, hold on to the table, take a step, come towards me. We're being very directive. We're telling them exactly what they need to do to mitigate. We can't completely avoid it, but to mitigate like serious harm, right? So we're not going to have this baby learn how to walk on a, on a asphalt driveway that's covered in glass. So why would we give a D1 learner a task that is not attainable for them? That doesn't make any sense. So being directive means we're also creating an environment where they win. We're making sure that they have everything they need to get an A+ on the test, okay? So S2 is high directive, high support. This is the most time-consuming leadership style because it involves both high amounts of direction and support. If not done properly, a person may linger at D2 for too long and may even quit. The intention with S2 is to re-energize and reteach. You see that up here. So, and this is all about building their competence, but also re-energizing them, okay? Style 3 is low direction and high support. Why? Because remember at style 3, they're starting to be able to, they've demonstrated competence. They don't necessarily need the supervision that they needed before. Okay, and so this requires the leader to listen, to draw out and encourage rather than provide the answer. And doing so builds their confidence, which is what we need for their commitment to increase. And then style 4 is low direction and low support. Remember, not no direction, not no support, just lower. The leader empowers the individual to act independently with appropriate resources to get the job done and recognizes their value and contribution. This is an exciting place for both the leader and the team member, of course. So the goal is to align to match leadership style with the development level. So S1 to D1, S2 to D2, and so forth. If there's not a match, there's over supervision, like S1, S2 with a D3, D4, or under supervision when you have S3, S4 with a D1 or D2. The more that leadership styles are aligned with development levels, the more quickly people develop and move through these levels. So yes, it takes more time initially, but in the long run, you're going to have fewer problems, fewer drama, because you're going to be developing people with intention to get from S1 to S2 to from D1 to D2 to D3 to D4. It really helps leaders understand why in one situation that they are getting the results and in another that they aren't. So I want you to think about, if you have direct reports, I want you to think about why you're getting results with one person and not with the other. More than likely, and this isn't about blame, this is just simply a mismatch between your leadership style and what that person needs developmentally. That's all. That's all it is, okay? So matching is so important. So can you see how it might impact the economics here? Let's take a look at the data. These stats show that most leaders are not flexible and use only one style of leadership. Matching isn't easy. For most people, it doesn't come naturally. It takes practice. You have to learn how to do it. So 54% of managers use only one style naturally. Only 1% use all 4 styles naturally. 11% use 3 naturally, and 34% use 2 styles naturally. I actually am, my LBA result told me that I actually use style 3 and 4 naturally. So I'm always being stretched when someone is a 1 or a 2. And so I'm just conscious of that. I just have to be conscious of that, okay? Think about your company and the critical tasks that you have across all areas of your organization. On those critical tasks, what percentage of people do you think are at D1, D2, D3, and D4? I want you to go ahead and mark on the screen as I continue to talk a little bit here. Just think about, where do you think most people are in your organization? Just think about that for a moment. And then I'm going to show you what the research shows as a typical level of development in any given organization. D3, D3. Yeah, so the research shows that about 10% are at D1, 25% are at D2, 50%, you all had it, man, 50% are at D3, and only 15% at D4. Think about the people at D3. They're performing well, but haven't reached their potential yet. Leaders have the ability to influence their people's development and help them move to D4 more quickly and to impact the economic environment of their workplace. One more stat here that I want to share with you. Oh, let me clear these. I just find this fascinating. Okay, so on the vertical axis is the net economic contribution, and the dotted line is 0, okay? So below the line is a negative contribution. In other words, it costs the company money. When a person is at D1 on a critical task, okay, they are making, is it making or costing the company money? It's costing the company money. Whenever you hire someone and you have to slow down to teach them something, or when they get a new task, it doesn't have to be a new hire. It could be someone that's getting just a new task or a new goal. It does cost the company money, because it's taking more time to get them fully developed. Remember, people at D1 are enthusiastic, but not able to complete the task on their own without direction. So it's important that we show up so that we can get them out of there, right? Then at D2, it's still costing the company money, because these people are now frustrated, right? They don't know they now know what they don't know. They're bumping their heads, they're bruising their knees, right? Just like that kid. At D3, we have variableness going on here. They are both, they can be making the company money and maybe costing the company a little bit of money still. And then at D4, when a person is at D4, the company is making money, but think about this. Think about whether the top 5% of your salespeople return a little more than or a little less than your average salesperson. Or are the people at D4, that small percentage that are at D4, they're the ones that can create the most net economic impact for the organization, and yet only 15% of people are there. Look at the huge opportunity here between D3 and D4, and yet most of our people are sitting here. So D3 sounds advanced developmentally, but it's light years away from what D4 can do for us, okay? All right, one more little stat here. It's actually a little testimonial, and I actually interviewed Gary on our podcast not too long ago, if you want to check that out. Gary Ridge is the CEO of WD-40, and they fully implemented SL2 at their organization, and this is what he said. SL2 helps us understand each situation and the leadership style that will meet the team member where they are with a particular task or project. The program provides leaders with the tools and skills they need to help their team members perform at the highest level possible. Here's what's cool. In 2016, WD-40 company did an engagement survey, and they do it every 2 years. And this was after they'd implemented SL2. Their overall employee engagement score is 92.8%. In addition, an incredible 98.4% of their employees indicated they love, not like, love to tell people they work for WD-40. An astonishing 99% of the team members said their opinions and values are a good fit with the WD-40 company. And these results are based on a 95% return rate. So this wasn't like the top 20% of the company doing the survey. No, 95% of the people that work for the company completed the survey. So it's not a flex through, it's an entire organization responding with that level of engagement. That is just, wow, we all would love to work for a company that can create those results. Most importantly, SL2 had a significant impact on the top line sales of the company, which increased 54%. And these results are not surprising. Gary Ridge is a fantastic SL2 leader who puts great emphasis on great managers throughout the organization. So it's not just him. When we do this, we implement it for everybody. If you have any interest in learning more about the SL2 experience, learning more for yourself, for your team, for your organization, it's offered in a wide array of opportunities for you to learn, everything from completely on demand, where you just get access to the online virtual tool and it takes you through the process on your own. We have a hybrid model that we've been doing with clients, which they really love, which is they do some online modules on their own, and then they do a live debrief with me. We do 4 of those debriefs online via Zoom, which is really fun. So we get to know each other. And then we can do a full live virtual, which is, it's all done in real time. It's 5 2-hour sessions. So that's a much more in-depth program. And then one day, someday, we'll be back to live in person, which is the way we prefer to do those sessions as well. So if you have any interest, SL2 can be delivered in really any way that you want, okay? When you engage in SL2, one of the cool things you get is an app. It's an SL2 app that helps you diagnose your folks. I like to mention that because it's a really easy, simple way to really learn how to diagnose people. And I'm just going to end with this, that if you want to connect with me, you can feel free to contact myself or our community engagement manager, Jason. There's our contact information on the screen. Type that down. I can throw it in chat real quick here. Also, I want to let you know that the recording is available for those who want it. What I'm going to do is, after our session, we're going to send an email that includes a link to the recording. You're going to get a PDF of the slides, so you'll also have that information on those slides. We have just a minute remaining. I wanted to leave a few more minutes for any questions. So let me just pause and see if there are any questions. If you have to go, thank you. I appreciate it. But I will leave the chat open for a few minutes just to see if anyone has any questions for me. Thank you, Melissa. Glad you were here today. Thanks, Katie. Appreciate your attention and time. Get you back on track. That's right, Dale. Okay, I don't see any questions in there. Once again, thank you so much for joining me for this 1-hour kind of mini workshop on SL2. I hope I hear from a few of you. We would love to help you out with this. And as always, if you just have questions and want to chat, just send me a quick email. Hope to see you all soon. Take care.